Hey everybody, Caleb here in the Rosa String Works Workshop. Today I've got this Gibson J50, and this is a real important one. This was brought to us by our friend Jake Jacobs, and if you've been following the shop talks, you know that shortly after he brought this to us, he became very sick, and unfortunately, we lost him a couple weeks ago. Fortunately for us, we've been keeping in touch with the family, and sending them all the love and prayers we can, and they've asked us to go ahead and complete the work on this guitar. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on this. Fortunately for me, Jerry's already done a pretty good inspection on this, and I have an idea what I'm going to need to do, so we can start on that. Rather unfortunately, there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done to this. The whole back needs to come off. There's quite a few problems internally, so the first thing we're going to do is work on getting the back off of here. That entails scoring around the binding, getting the binding off in one piece so that it'll go back on in one piece. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. It's been a relatively hectic week here, getting the last hurrah out and keeping the secret. So I haven't really gotten to film a whole lot on this, but I have been working on it off and on. I got all the binding off. I didn't show any of that, but we've shown it before. It's a really long, time-consuming process. Basically, you take a sharp blade and you score around the back and on the side to break the finish, and then you have to work the binding off. I got it all off in two pieces. The piece behind the neck didn't want to come out, but I finally got it out. Anyways, after that, I've started working on getting this back loose. Similar to the binding, it really wasn't super loose in any one spot, but I found the seam between the back and the sides, and I used the really thin razor saw to just kind of cut that seam. Then I've been able to work the really thin scalpel blade in there, and it started to work it up, and the back is coming loose really well. I'm just working my way around now. I think you can see it's loose a fair amount. So I'm working my way around the body, and I'm not going to pry up or down, because that's a really good way to crack the back and crack the finish. So I'm just working left or right, basically. And if I had a thicker blade, I'd be more worried about cracking it as well. But these scalpel blades are basically the thinnest blades we got. I can see the seam here between the back and the sides, and it can help me to just run the knife down the seam. And I don't have to look quite so hard to find it. What I might also do is go get one of the palette knives and heat it up. That helps sometimes. My only worry is with those thicker knives, I risk more tearing up the back and the sides. I'll see how this goes, and I'm going to work on this a little bit more off camera. We'll see where we get and how we get there. So I got the back off of this guitar, and as I'm looking on the inside, I think you can probably see how much of a mess it's actually turning out to be. One thing that's kind of neat to see is you can see the bridge plate was replaced. You can tell it's not the original because it doesn't fit quite perfect, but it's dated 9/15 of 92. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but and then there's the name of the guy who replaced it. It's kind of hard to read. Then as I'm looking along, the X brace is busted here. It's also busted here. Busted up in here, and someone's put an extra piece of wood in there. This brace is coming loose. I can actually wiggle this one as well as this one over here, and this brace up here is coming loose too. So it definitely needed to come apart. This bridge plate is also coming loose on the front a fair amount, so I've got my work cut out for me here. Now that the back is off of here, I can start thinking about where I'm going to start. I'm not real sure. We will have to see where I go from here. So I'm going to take a minute and look this all over, figure out where I want to start, and then we'll come back to this. So I'm going to start by pulling some of these random pieces of wood out of here. As I'm looking here, there's this piece right here that they put along this brace right where it's broken, but it's not even attached to this side of the brace, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that out of there. So I've pretty much decided that replacing these X braces is probably the right call. Because of how busted they are and where they're busted, I don't think they're going to be doing a whole lot of good for me to try to glue this back together, especially when I can't get glue in there. And on top of that, they're really loose, but I've been working on getting them off. And basically I've heated this really thin knife up. Before I started any of this, you might be able to see there's pencil marks on these braces. That's because I took some measurements on like length and how tall it was at certain lengths. They're about an inch apart, all these pencil marks. That's to hopefully get the new braces to a similar size, so nothing should change all that much. I'll probably make the new ones a little bigger, just a little bigger, because obviously these ones didn't hold up. That was already broke. I didn't do any of that. It's just the way this guitar is, for the most part, it's just these X braces are really busted. And also taking these X braces out will help me get this bridge plate out as well, because then I can come straight at it. And it shouldn't take much to come off. I've been working at this for a little while, so it shouldn't be too much more, and these braces will be off of here.
On my last day on earth, when my last words will be heard, I want you there to hear the story I will tell.
Yeah, those didn't even cross over. Those braces, at least this one, was cut exactly in line with this brace. When I do this again, those will actually cross over and kind of mate together a little better. I'll let that heat up a little bit more. I'll get a little bit further along with this here in a minute. Just about got this last brace out of here. Yeah, that one broke, but that's okay. Not a big deal. You can see a lot of these were just like broken in half. It almost looks like somebody tried to glue them back together, but it sure didn't hold any semblance of back together. So put those all aside. There you can see all them braces are out, except for that little piece right there. I think while my tools are still hot, I'm going to go ahead and get this bridge plate off of here. I don't think that's going to be a big issue. The biggest thing is to not pry against the top, because you'll end up busting the top that way. Yeah, I'd say this was pretty loose since it went that far in with no resistance. Now I'm not running this up and down. I'm just trying to work it left to right. That way I'm not putting any pressure on the top. Well, I'm not putting any more pressure than I have to on the top. Works better when the tools are warm, so I'll try to keep them warm. Well, I got the bridge removal tool that, the block of aluminum with the heater in it that we use all the time. And I'm setting it on that bridge plate, letting it get warm. Hopefully that'll soften that glue up a little bit more, and it will all come out a little bit faster. I've had this heating up for a little bit, so it should be nice and warm. And yeah, my knife slides right underneath there. Well, for the most part it does. Alright, so that side is free. Alright, so we'll let the rest of that warm up a little bit longer. You know, for as loose as this was, I'm getting it really warm and it's still fighting me. So, and I gotta be really careful because I don't want to bust the top and I don't want to do any damage to the top. So it takes a little bit to do this carefully. So we'll let this heat up some more. Try to take it a little further.
Before my spirit rises high above the white cloud-filled sky, please be there to hear my last words on earth. My last words on earth will be spoke with you in mind, and I'll talk about a good life, how your life enriched mine.
So, I got that off of there reasonably well, I guess. It was really only stuck from behind the pinholes, you know, backwards. It just wasn't stuck in front of it at all. So this was, or at one point this had an adjustable bridge on it, and you can see here they didn't bother filling the holes for the hardware with any wood. It's all just glue. We are going to replace the bridge on this, but I think for right now I'm just going to leave this as it is, and when we take the bridge off of there I'll fill that with wood. I believe what we're going to work on next is getting this cleaned up and maybe looking at making some new X braces for this. So I'll give this a little bit of time to cool off, get everything cleaned off my desk, and then we will start cleaning this up so that we can put some new X braces in there. I've been using this chisel to kind of scrape off anything that would prevent me from getting good flat glue up. And it's working pretty good. It's coming along, it's getting nice and clean. There's a few more spots. Not a whole lot more, and then we're just about ready to glue some braces in here. So I've come a pretty far away now. I've got some X braces made, and those are basically ready to go in. My problem was I went and I set this in the go bar, and this bridge that someone had replaced the original with was so oversized it wouldn't fit real well. So because I was going to take it off anyway, I've just decided to go ahead and take it off. Then it'll be out of my way and won't be a problem. So I've got it heat up. It's about 430 degrees at this point. I'm taking my real thin knife and I'm just working it in. Working it a little sideways and pulling it out. I'm not doing any up and down pressure. Right now that's really key because there's not a whole lot on the inside to keep me from just poking through the top. So I gotta be really careful with this.
Most of all, I want to say you've been good to me. I hope you're there to hear my last words on earth.
So one of the last things I need to do before I can glue these braces in is make the notch for them to, mate together. And I've started on that. You can see I drew with pencil where they would overlap, and I did that by laying one in, drawing it on, and laying the other one in and drawing it on. And that's helped me get this line here. Let's see if I put this in here. I've got these lines here. I've started sawing these out. And basically I'll saw this down to about half the thickness of this, and then do the opposite one here so that those will notch together really well, and that'll keep everything nice and strong. Before, one of these was solid and the other one was just cut off and butted up against. I think this will help keep things a little more solid and strong this way. So I've started on that on here, you can see. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just taking the saw and cutting that line. Alright, you can see there that sits, both pieces sit in there nice and flat. Press down real good. You can see my notch there, how that works. So there's a notch out of this piece and a notch out of this piece, and they fit perfect together. So I'm going to go ahead and get to gluing this on here. I'm going to start with the piece that goes on the bottom. It's typically a good place to start.
Please don't be sad. You're a perfect wife. You were there through the good times and the sad. Before I leave you on this earth, you gotta hear my last words. Please be there to hear my last words on earth. My last words on earth will be spoke with you in mind. And I'll talk about our good life, how your life enriched mine.
So these braces glued up, very nice. The next thing I'm going to do is actually glue in this bridge plate. I made this yesterday while I was waiting for these braces to dry. And it fits in there nice and tight. All the corners meet up pretty good. And this is a Padauk bridge plate. It's actually a little thinner than the old one because I was measuring this one and I measured almost 140 thousandths, which is a little thicker than I'd like. So this one's about 125. I imagine this one's still going to do a better job than this one because it'll be glued in more than just this area. If we do a good job of getting it clamped down, it should be way better than the one before. You can see here I've actually got a board clamped to the front of the guitar. That's both to kind of keep everything flat and for me to clamp against with my clamps through the sound hole. And I'm going to do this with clamps, regular clamps rather than in the go bar, because clamping something flat in the go bar doesn't always work as well. And you know, it would probably be fine, but I want this to be as good as I can get it, so this is what I'm going to do. I also have a caul for the top of this clamp, top of this plate, to help even out the pressure. So that's going on there when I'll put clamps on it. So we'll put some glue on here and stick her down.
Most of all, I want to say you've been good to me. I hope you're there to hear my last words on earth. Please be there to hear my last words on earth.
I also wiped this down with acetone before I stuck it down, before I put glue on it. This was to hopefully get some of the oils off of it, and you can see this is just some of it. This is like the third time I wiped it down and I still got all this orange off of there.
Watching the leaves fall to the ground, just like my life, they're spinning around. The touch of the wind, the clouds rolling on, reminds me of when life was a song.
So this sat up just like this for 3 or 4 hours, and I'd like to move on, so I'm going to go ahead and take the clamps off of here. I just thought I'd show this one more time. See, I got one a little closer to the X, one a little from the back, and then 2 on each side. So I think that was a good even pressure. Alright, and we're not going to go putting any stress on this for a little while, so you know, it'll have some more time to totally cure, but I think it's going to be fine in general. I will figure out where we go from here. So you can see I've got the back clamped on at the neck block to keep everything stiff, and it's just about perfectly lined up. So if I run a straight edge on here, and I've got the temporary bridge here, I'm sitting at a pretty good height. I'm real happy with that, I think. So I think I'm good to glue the back on where it lines up right. So I'm not worried about the neck angle. So I can set this all aside. We can go back to the back. And I will get this upper bout glued up.
Oh, when life was a song, we'd dance and we'd sing. When life was a song, but it's spelled down since you're gone. The sun in the sky has disappeared. It's covered up by a cloud full of tears. The whispering creek that's rolling along reminds me of when life was a song.
I am ready to glue the binding back onto this Gibson here. I am going to be using this canopy glue. This comes in a red label now. It's all the same stuff as far as I know, but it's canopy glue formula 560. It works really good for plastic to wood, so that's what I'm going to use it for, is plastic to wood. So I'll put it all the way up to about here, and I'll use the brush to spread it out a little more evenly. I'm starting at the end here because I have a good point of reference. I can see where it goes behind the neck. So what I'll do is I'll take some of this binding tape. This is for attaching binding. We'll basically just go around the whole guitar doing this.
Oh, when life was a song, we'd dance and we'd sing. When life was a song, but it's spelled down since you're gone.
Before I started filming, I took the chisel around this whole binding channel, cleaned out any glue from gluing the back on, so I know it's nice and clean. There should be good contact all the way around. The waist is the hardest part to get. It tends to fight you the most. And I also alternate which direction I'm pulling the binding in. I start on the bottom and pull it in, and then I'll start on the top and pull it down. And I think that evens out the pressure a little better. You know, if you were really good, it shouldn't really matter, and it probably doesn't matter all that much because it all ends up in the binding channel as it is. It makes me feel a little more secure about it. Sometimes I forget what I just did, so I'll just do whatever feels right anyway. Like, I'm pretty sure that one was wrong, but it doesn't matter that much. So I'll go ahead and get this finished up, and I'll probably just let it set for, you know, a couple of hours to totally set up. And hopefully we'll be ready to move on after this is all glued back on. Now that the binding's back on that J50, I'm starting to work on a bridge that doesn't look quite so haphazard. So I've got a piece of rosewood here, and this is what my new bridge is going to be. And I've got the old bridge, which is basically the old footprint, so I'm going to try to use it. I'm just going to try to make the shaping look a little more intentional this time. I think I'm going to do what I've done before and tape this on the top and then go get the cutout. This front edge is flat, so I'm putting it flat with this. And then I'll go cut this back off right now. Then we'll go over to the sander and shape some of this a little bit better.
A song that's been sung so many times. I've been truly tired, weathers and dives. Oh, when life was a song, we dance and we sing. When life was a song.
So I've got the old bridge still taped on top of the new bridge. This time I've changed the taping method a little bit. I'm going to drill these holes. You can probably see, well, maybe. It goes right in the old hole, and this is the largest drill bit that fits all the way through the hole, so it indexes pretty good. The old bridge basically gets it lined up so that the hole goes right where it was. So I'm going to go ahead and drill these.
We dance and we sing. When life was a song, but it's moved on since you've gone.
I've got this bridge indexed on here with these drill bits, the exact size that I drilled these holes with. The holes in the top were a little filled with glue, so I went ahead and drilled them out with these holes, or these drill bits as well, so it indexes in there perfectly. So what I'm going to do now is mark around the outside, make sure that there's no finish underneath it, because I know that there is. I'll take that little bit of finish off, and then we'll glue this thing down here. So you can see I got all the finish scraped off from underneath this bridge. And I did most of that with just this rounded X-Acto knife. There wasn't a whole lot to do, so it went pretty quick. I am ready to glue this on, I believe.
While I'm waiting for tomorrow, what do I do with all the pain? I am aching like a river, swelling while outside its banks. I am longing like the water for a resting place.
Well, my friends, in this video up to now, you've been watching Caleb work on this guitar. This came from Jake Jacobs. Jake was a nice fella. He stayed at our rental retreat. He brought this guitar, mighty proud of it, and he wanted to leave it as a legacy to his family. He wanted us to inlay his initials at the 12th fret, JJ. And the reason is because whoever this is going to be left to, their initials are also JJ. There's a lot of JJs in the family, apparently. Caleb has done a lot of work on this, and to be quite honest, it's a couple of months ago when he was working on this. So it's just been sitting. I need to get back to it. I can tell that he had the back off of this. I know we made a new bridge for it. I don't even know what all Caleb did, so I'll actually have to watch the video to know what all he did. I just remember some of it. I know we had quite a bit of work to do on this. I'm just going to look down at, oh, the neck angle looks great on it. I hope it's perfect. It looks like it is. So that looks good. Everything else looks solid. But I can tell that this binding needs to be cleaned up now where it was glued back on. And then we have to do the inlay, and we have to route the slot in here, it looks like. So I'm just looking at it myself as I'm making this video. This is my first look at it, so I'm just deciding everything I have to do to it to finish it up. So that's all I see right at the moment. It probably will need a light fret dressing or something. I can tell the frets have not been filed and recrowned or anything. So it'll probably need that too. We're on the downhill slide now that I've got it in my hands. So let's get going. I'm gonna work on the cleaning up the binding first. Anytime you take the back off of an instrument, it's a destructive process. As I've said many times, there is no zipper. So you basically are breaking it when you take it apart. The tape on here left a lot of residue. So the first thing I think I'm gonna do, just to save myself a lot of hassle, is to take some lighter fluid here, one of my wonderful little shop towels, and I'll just dab a little bit of that on here and see if this is cleaning up the tape. Yeah, it seems like it's going to. Technically, that's not lighter fluid anymore in that can. I think it's naphtha, but it's easy to put it, I just put it in this can now, and it's easy to use it in that can versus getting out a great big gallon can of naphtha. Yeah, that's doing a pretty good job. I gotta be honest, it's still pretty rough right at the edges there, and I think some of that's the glue, and it's just hard to take these apart and put them back together without, being able to tell it. And unfortunately, you can tell it. I mean, there's no question about the fact that this has been off. You can tell that. But we'll just clean it up as best we can. Wherever there's gaps, like right in here, these cracks, and maybe you can see that there's actually little gaps in here. I don't know. Maybe possibly try to fill that with some thick CA glue or something. I'm not sure. I'll cross those bridges as I get to them. I know this thing was in rough shape. I just don't know how rough it was. I just don't remember. It's really sad that Jake Jacobs, in case I haven't mentioned it up to now, he did pass away with the coronavirus. He left here. He was actually ill when he left here. He basically went home and went right into the hospital, and actually only lasted a short time in the hospital. Terrible, just absolutely horrible. But it really was his last request to fix this guitar up and have it in good shape to leave it in the hands of one of his family loved ones. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do our best to make that happen. Very ironic that was his goal when he was in perfect health. He was in perfect health when he was here. And just a super pleasant man. Just really very, very, very nice. My wife really liked him, and she was very sad to hear that he had passed. Yeah, there's a lot of creeping crud on here that I'm taking off, and I don't know if all of that came from gluing the binding back on there, or if some of that's from something else. I really don't know, but this is cleaning up a lot of stuff. I'm just wiping down pretty much the whole thing with this at this point. I can see other stuff, like there's a little spot right there. It's coming off as I rub it. Typically, paint thinner and naphtha won't hurt your finish, typically, but you should always test it if you're not sure. You can see a lot of extra glue right along here, so I'll have to clean all that up. Again, I think these little blue shop towels are the perfect thing to do all this with. They're very absorbent, and they also help buff the instrument out while you're doing it. I just really like them. I don't think there's anything better that you can use on an instrument than these. And again, you don't want to get the quilted version of this. You just want the plain, smooth version. I have used the quilted, and they do not work. At least not for me. So now I'm actually cleaning up the back where the tape got on there too. Well, that's much better, but I'm still not exactly happy with this yet. It's not a bad job, it's just not as good as I was hoping it would be. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to have to do here. I'm just rubbing right on that rough area with this plastic pick to see if anything pops off. Yeah, I may have to get the close-up glasses and really get down to detail on this and try to smooth it out and clean it up, because I'm not real happy with it right now. I'm going to do most of that off camera, and if I do anything significant, I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm probably going to take a single edge razor blade and just get really detailed on the edges here where it's edge going to the guitar because it's kind of rough, and I think a lot of that's just glue, and I'm just going to clean it off as best I can. One of my wonderful viewers sent me these plastic razor blades, and they're plastic. They don't really scratch the instrument, and you can use them to rub things pretty good. For instance, this canopy glue, which is what I believe he used to put this back on with, it doesn't do anything to your finish, but if it does get on your finish, you can. It's kind of like a really hard rubber cement. You can rub it back off. It's much harder than rubber cement. Don't get me wrong, but it kind of puts you to the mind of that, because you can kind of roll it up and get it off of there, but it's much harder than that. So it takes a little more work than what rubber cement would take, but it's similar to that. And so I can get most of that off of here with just this plastic razor blade. And another thing you can use is just a guitar pick if you don't have these. So a guitar pick works pretty good. But these work a little bit better because they do have a little finer edge. Here's a good example. Maybe you can see right here, there's some glue. Maybe I'll get it up there a little closer. There you go. And then I'll just hold this between my knees here, and I'll rub that off and hopefully show you what it looks like after it's rubbed off. That one there, I'll be honest, it was a little worse than most of them, but it's doing pretty good. I think I've about got rid of it all. I'm trying a little bit of this naphtha on here too, just to see if it cleans up a little bit better. That was one of the worst places. Wouldn't you know, that's what I'd pick to show you. But you can see there, it's pretty much gone. Anyway, the rest of them haven't been that bad. But anyway, this works pretty good, and it does clean it up, and it doesn't seem to scratch it at all, which is very good. You don't want to scratch it. I do think I'm still going to have to go through and fill some gaps, and probably going to do that with some thick CA glue, and I'll show you what that looks like when I get to that. I've said before that you know, when you take the back off of an instrument, you're really creating almost as many problems as you're solving. You'd be surprised how difficult it is. Everybody says, "Oh, just take the back off." Yeah, well, yeah, sure, no problem. But you know, you're messing with your neck angle. Because when you take your back off, your neck can spring any way it wants to. So you're messing with your neck angle. The sides often spring out or in or something, and so when you put the back on it, you can't get it to line up. It's almost impossible, and I say almost impossible. In fact, I'm not even sure I've ever done it, to be honest with you, to get them perfectly lined back up when you put the back on them. There always will be something that you can feel or notice that's a little bit out of alignment. Quite honestly, the treble side of this is not too bad. It's pretty good. But the bass side of this, which is on the side where the user is, you know, it's a little bit out of alignment, but not terrible. I mean, I've seen much worse. I've done much worse, I'll be honest. But because it's a little bit out of alignment there, what I did was I took this single edge razor blade and tried to bevel that edge down just a little bit so that it would come in contact there with the side. In other words, the binding standing out proud from the side a little bit. So I'm just trying to very lightly bevel just the corner that's next to the guitar there, so you don't feel it so much. Not much you can do about it, honestly. It's going to happen when you do this. And I always have said, too, that I believe Gibsons are the worst to try to realign. In my opinion, and it's just an opinion, everybody's entitled to one, I think the Gibsons were built under a lot of stress. In other words, I think the sides were forced into a mold with more stress than your average guitar. And so when you take the back off, the sides spring out a lot. And it's really difficult to get them to go back together and be perfectly in alignment. I think Caleb did a pretty good job on this, actually. But, you know, it's never perfect, and I don't think anybody can make them perfect. This binding broke right here, so I'm trying to And it's not perfectly in alignment right here either. The end of this binding broke right here, and it's where it goes under the neck. So I'm trying to smooth that out where it doesn't look so noticeable. The biggest problem with scraping this binding, because it's so yellowed over the years, when you start scraping it, it turns white. So that's not good, but on the other hand, neither is a misalignment, so I don't know. You just got to do what you got to do, you know what I mean? I'll show you a close-up of what I'm dealing with. I've already scraped it a lot, but you can see how it broke right here. This was sticking up quite a bit higher than that. And anyway, I actually see that it's a little bit loose there now, so that's a good thing for me. I can get my razor blade in there, clean that out. Get my X-Acto knife. It looks like I can see that it's not in right here, so I'm going to clean this out really good and re-glue this. I didn't realize it was loose, but it is. You can see the glue on the end of it here too, so I'm going to get that cleaned off. I'm going to do a little bit more cleaning up right here, and then I'm going to glue that back. I think I can make that match up a lot better. Wish I'd have noticed that before I started scraping it, because that would have even been better. Well, I'm going to do that a little more off camera, and then I'll show you what it looks like after I get it lined up. I'm going to attempt to CA glue this back in place. I'm going to have to hold it with my finger. Someone said use wax on your rubber glove to keep from gluing your finger to it. I think I'm going to try that and see if that works. I don't have the best wax here right at the moment, but I'll try this. This is some beeswax. It's the Be Good oil wax type stuff, and I'll just put that on my finger there a little bit. I've taped this off because I'm afraid this is going to get real messy, and it's really difficult to get glue in a place like this. And I think the CA glue is about the only thing I'm going to got a chance to get in here, because I can't clamp this. So I think I'm going to have to hold it like that. It seemed to work where I had the wax on there. Where I didn't, it did stick a little bit, but I think that wax did actually work. That stuff is liquid though. It would be better to take like a paste wax is what would be better. I just didn't have any handy. They have a little tape residue to clean up again. Seems to be the story on this guitar. Lots of residue. Well, that's definitely tight and definitely better in line. Actually, the scraping I did makes it go in line pretty close. I thought maybe that would put it below the mark, and it's still at least even or even slightly proud. I could probably scrape it a little bit more still, but it's way better than it was. Now we've got lots of issues here, like this binding seems to be sticking up a little proud in places like right here and here. It just, sometimes that happens. I think I could have perhaps got that lined up a little bit better than Caleb did here. I think that maybe it just needed to be cleaned a little bit better in a place or two. I don't know, it's difficult to say. But right here, there's a pretty big gap right here, and I think I'm going to push the binding in because it does look like it's going to go in a little bit, and I'm going to try some CA glue to hold that in place. So I'm going to do a lot of touch-up like that. I'm not going to film all that, but I'll kind of show you my results or anything significant that pops up. My friends, it's been a couple of weeks since I worked on this Gibson J50 guitar for Jake Jacobs. Had all kinds of interruptions. Life and customers and, miscellaneous farm things, business, just things to do. So, I'm back to it this morning, and I think I should be able to get this thing finished up, or at least I hope so. I have put on my temporary intonation rig here, which just amounts to a coat hanger wire bent with some hooks on the ends. That way I can hook on both E strings. And I have a saddle that is totally loose, just sitting on top of this bridge. There's no slot or anything. This bridge has not been slotted yet. So I have the saddle sitting there, and I can move it around. And I also have checked the action to try to get the action pretty close, because the closer you get the action, the better your intonation will be when you're final. So I'm right now I'm at 85, 90 roughly, and here I'm at a little bit higher actually, maybe 90, 95 on the high E side. I don't know why this saddle's cut a little funny, but anyway, it's pretty close. And when I check it here, I'm getting really close on my tuner now. I'll turn the tuner around here where hopefully you can see it. Maybe I can zoom in a little bit and you can see the tuner and the guitar both. Try to get your E note as perfect as possible. Then you note it. You want to do it 2 or 3 times because they can lie to you. And you notice that it's actually just a tiny bit sharp, but the open note is also just a tiny bit sharp. So as long as you're in the same relative place, you're pretty darn close. That's pretty good. Here's the big E. Pretty close. The way it works is when you're sharp, the distance between your 12th fret and your saddle is too short. That sharp means that it's too short. You need to move this back. Same way here. So if your note is sharp when you note it at the 12th fret, then your saddle is a little bit too close and you just need to move it back. If the note is flat, well, that means it's too far back and you have to slide it forward. It's just that simple. It's not rocket science at all. And you just want to get it as close as you possibly can, and you're way better off to do it 2 or 3 times and check it 2 or 3 times. That's really good right there. And I've checked it 3 or 4 times now, so I'm going to say that that's perfect, and at least as perfect as intonation can be. And I'm going to take a very fine leaded pencil. This is a 0.5 millimeter lead, and I'm going to mark the front edge of that, and I do it right under the string. And I just put 2 marks, and it's the front edge of the saddle that I care about. The way I do my saddles, the last place touching the string is the front edge of the saddle. You could do it in the middle like some saddles are cut, but the problem is then you have a lot more trouble marking it here. And if the note turns out that it's sharp and you need to slide it back, which is probably more often the case than not, at least on one string or the other, you don't have any room to slide it back if you're intonating off the middle of the saddle. So that's why I intonate off the front edge of the saddle, which is exactly the same as the front edge of the nut. Your intonation is judged from the front edge or the inside edge, whatever way you want to call it. So I've got both of those marked. I'll draw a straight line across there and we'll get busy with the router. Well, my friends, I believe I've got this all set perfectly. This white rig you see on here is just something I made. This top piece here, I can adjust it and to the angle of the saddle. The light on this base provides a really good look at the alignment. So I've aligned the base here really well to the line, and I'm staying behind the line, cutting right up to the line. And this little piece here just floats, it just lays on here. It just keeps you level, basically. So, and the reason I've got it back over this far is because this is a really thick pick guard, and I don't want this sitting up on top of the pick guard. I think I'll be able to get to it there without losing balance. I'll just have to keep my balance mostly on this side over here because I'm really running off the end. I am going to make a very long saddle on this because this had a long saddle on it originally. It had one of the through type saddles, but this was not original. Somebody did this, I can tell. A long saddle does help you spread your sound across the top a little better, I believe. So we are going to put a long saddle. We're just not going going to make it a through saddle. It's going to be a pretty long one though, as saddles go. I've already set the depth, and this is a plunge router, so as long as I don't move this, I can plunge this down to the proper depth. So here we go. Well, that went as well as it could go so far. I had it set to plunge about 100 thousandths of an inch deep. Let's see how we did. 97 thousandths, so we missed it by 3 thousandths, roughly 3/4 of a hair. Okay, we are now going to plunge another 100, and hopefully it will go as well. Well, I made 2 passes at about 100 thousandths, so we should be pretty close to 200 thousandths deep. 196, so we're off by just a hair. 198, so depends how you measure it. When you get down to that kind of measuring, the least little thing can change it. I think I'm going to call that deep enough. The bridge itself is 340 thousandths thick, and that'll give us a good bite down into the bridge. I measured this at 107, 108, and I've got this presently at 107. I think it may go in there. It's kind of starting, but it's not going all the way down. I'm going to go ahead and cut it to length and round off the ends, and then maybe do some very fine fitting and scraping here to get it down in there perfectly. I've done a little fitting off camera, but I'm having trouble getting it to go down in there. I do not think it's even near the full depth. I think it's probably less than 100 thousandths in there even. For some reason, it's just a little tight. Oh, it is fairly even in there, at least, according to my line I drew. But we're nowhere near the depth. There's the depth there, and you can see that, perhaps you can see there that it needs to go that much deeper to the end of that point. So it's catching on something, but it is at least going in fairly even. What my guess is, it's catching on probably the 2 different plunges. You know, you think you're going to get it plunged perfect and perfectly smooth across there, but it rarely does that. So usually there's some little ridge or something that you can barely even see. That's usually all it takes. So I'm just going to monkey around here and see if I can't find that little ridge and clean it off. I'm using the back of the X-Acto knife at the moment, kind of like a scraper. May have to just run the saddle through the sander one more time and not adjust the sander either. I think that's the other problem. I think I'm still just a tiny bit thick. Well, with a little bit more effort cleaning and things in there, you can see now my line is perfectly down there, and then I didn't, it's exactly at the line, so that should be perfect. You can't do much better than perfect, so I'll call that good enough. Now I'm going to take this saddle, since it was pretty close, a little bit high on the treble side, but it was pretty darn close, so I'm going to use that kind of as my pattern, just to give myself an idea about where I want to be over at the sander. And I'm going to go ahead and get this thing sanded down. I'm going to do a fret dressing to see if I feel anything. Yeah, I'm feeling something right in here pulling. That's probably going to do the job on this one. And I'm going to do some recrowning and cutting off the ends here. The ends are sticking out a little bit proud in places. In fact, the ends are a little bit out, so I think I'll just go ahead and round them off with this. Okay, I think that's going to work. Now we'll go to the recrowner.
I am making like a river, swelling while outside its banks. I am longing like the water for a resting
I'm going to intentionally leave a little bit of the finger grooves here where they're in the fingerboard. As Jake has passed away, that's the last little bit there that he left on this guitar, and we're going to leave a little bit of that there for the family. These are not that deep. I could easily take them out, but I just feel like that's a good tribute to Jake.
What do we do with all our sorrow, with all the loss we gain? I believe there come tomorrow we may blossom from the rain. I am aching like a river, swelling well outside its banks. I am longing like the water for a resting place. I am longing like the water for a resting
And then the only other thing to do is to wipe it down with some oil. We'll put a couple of drops on here. Doesn't take very much. This has really large frets on it, so I'm going to take a brush and work the oil into the grooves a little bit better, right next to the fret wire. It's hard to get it in there. I believe that's adequate. And then we just wipe off all the excess oil. And there's what she looks like, a nice new looking fingerboard basically, with just the least little bit hint of his finger grooves in there, right up in the first couple of frets. I think we're finished with that. Now before we put the strings on it, I don't want to forget to put on the new truss rod cover. And if you're wondering how I made this, there is a complete video out, a separate video on this, and you can see that in that video. Let's get that screwed down. Well, we have a little bit of an issue here because putting the truss rod cover on, I noticed that the original one had a really short screw, and it's obvious why, because it goes right straight into the truss rod. Yeah, I don't know how I'm gonna get around that. There's really nothing to screw into. Kind of sad that it's that way, but it is. I don't know what else to try here except to just go ahead and cut off one of these screws a lot. Anyway, and then I'm thinking of just sticking it in this hole, see if it'll actually tighten down a little bit. I don't think it really will much. Yeah, it actually did, believe it or not. Maybe I'll just leave well enough alone, since it did actually tighten down. Okay, we're gonna call that good, because if you just, you know, hold your breath wrong there, it's gonna come out of there. And I think we're gonna string this thing back up and finish her up. A little bit ahead of myself here. It's gonna be hard to put strings on this if I don't drill these holes all the way through, so I guess I better do that. One more thing I need to do is oil this bridge. Well, I think that's everything we can do. We may as well see what she sounds like. Well, my friends, off camera I did a little more tweaking. I lowered the saddle down a little bit. You've seen me do that a million times. I got the action about 85 all the way across. It's pretty darn good. It plays real easy. The action down at the other end was already pretty low, so I don't see any reason to do anything else there. It's got a pretty decent sound, a little bit on the muted side if you ask me. It doesn't ring out like it could perhaps. It's got a good, nice sound. My brother's in the shop and he said, "Hey, that's got a pretty good sound." And I said, "Yeah, that's what that Paducah bridge plate will do for you." But no, it don't hurt anything, I can tell you that for sure. And for those of you who are skeptics about changing out the factory bridge plate, because a few of you have got onto me about that, well, Martin puts in hardwood bridge plates. They put in rosewood and all kinds of things. You know, a good quality bridge plate is worth its weight in gold. You know, people are funny about things, and they, like for instance, when Gibson had the idea to put in plywood there. You know, why would you ever do that in your most critical spot on the guitar? There's no more critical place on the guitar than the bridge plate. And you skimp there? Not likely. That's just not the right thing to do. Well, anyway, you can argue that all day. I can tell you for sure that the guitar is up in really good shape, and I expect it to stay in really good shape for at least 50 years. It's going to last a long time. Let me just give you some sound on it here for everyone. Anyway, it's got a pretty decent sound. For those of you who are non-believers, you can turn it off right now because you're finished. For the rest of you who would like to hear me sing a song, and a tribute song that I'm going to send out to Jake Jacobs and his family, I've got one in mind here, and I think it fits the occasion perfectly. Somewhere beyond the grave, there is a land that Jesus went to prepare by his own hand. And for the saved by grace, there is a resting place. And in a few more days, it will be mine. Some call it heaven, some call it dreaming, so let me dream on. Some call it paradise, somewhere beyond the sky. Some call it heaven, I call it home. Someone said you can't go back home again, and that things will not ever be as good as they've been. Well, I've got good news for you. When heaven comes into view, one glimpse and you'll know the best is yet to come. Some call it heaven, I call it home. Some call it dreaming, so let me dream on. Some call it paradise, somewhere beyond the skies. Some call it heaven, I call it home. Some call it heaven, I call it home. Rest in peace, my friend Jake. The rest of you, thank you so much for watching.